Hey there, Roundtable guys. David here again. I promised to report to you from the trip that I took this last weekend to go see Michael Ward and Malcolm Guite in Nashville. In here in the shop while my wife is using the other computer. And so anyway, I'm going to do that. What happened was in the morning, Malcolm Guite preached a sermon on Mark 8, 27 through 38, and then during the Sunday school hour, Michael Ward spoke on C.S. Lewis and the Holy Spirit. And so I'm going to go over some of the things that they said that I thought were important, kind of give you an idea of what happened. That evening, from 6 to 7:30, Malcolm went first, and then Michael after him. They had the evening split up in about 35-40-minute sections with some question and answer at the end. And it was about the seven heavens. Malcolm had his own way of dealing with it. Michael, of course, had a lot of Planet Narnia type stuff. Really, that was really good, and I confirmed with them that this is the material that they're going to be sharing up at the Wade Center at Wheaton in Chicago next week. And since it's pretty much the same material, and because of the timing of things, then I decided that it just wouldn't be practical for me to go up there. I don't think it'd be helpful for me to go up there right now. But you can still get, I can still give you the material. Now in this video, what I'm going to do is talk about what they covered in the morning, Sunday morning. So we're going to start with Malcolm's sermon, and it was from Mark chapter 8, verses 27 through 33. That's the passage where we have Peter's confession. Jesus asked the disciples, who are people saying that they think that I am? And of course, you know, oh, you're Elijah, you're John the Baptist, and so forth. Then he says, who do you think I am? Peter says, you're the Messiah. And then he tells them, well, don't tell anybody. And then starts talking about how he's going to die and in Jerusalem. And then of course Peter rebukes him and said, saying, no, this ain't going to happen. And then Jesus says, get behind me, Satan. And so that's what the sermon was about. And so Malcolm Guite, who we finally got to meet, by the way, it was good, fun to meet him. Oh, and it's just also kind of amusing. Malcolm Guite, he's a very artistic guy, and among his many things that he does over in Cambridge, he also plays in a rock band. So today, Michael Ward is at Duke University speaking. Well, Malcolm went and I think he went and visited the Gibson Guitar Center in Nashville. So Malcolm's out visiting, looking at guitars, and he posted a video on his Facebook today where he had a Gibson J45, and he had written a poem about it, and he was just reciting it from memory while he was playing the J45. So he was having a good time while Michael's out working. I think it's rather amusing. But anyway. So some important points that he made. First of all, Jesus asked the disciples, who do people think I am? And of course he's working on trying to get them to make their own confession. But Malcolm said this shows that Jesus was not detached from what people were thinking, from the world around him. I thought that was an interesting observation. But then he asked them, he says, well, what do you think about me? And that shows that Jesus is expecting us to think about what we believe and make up our own mind about things so that then we can speak the truth into the society around us. So it is a challenge of Jesus saying, all right, well, where are you at with this? And that's where decisiveness is an important quality, an important virtue. I'm talking, obviously I'm talking off my head now, but that is something that I struggle with a lot. And I think it's because of my perfectionist personality. I get indecisive, but James says a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways, and if you're always afraid of what you might miss, and so you never make up your mind, guess what? Nothing really good is happening. So Jesus is saying, where are you coming down on this, guys? And then Peter speaks up and says, well, you're the Messiah. And and then of course Jesus says, well, don't tell anybody. which would have been confusing, disappointing, kind of frustrating for the disciples, as you can imagine. And then Jesus says, this is going to happen, this is going to happen. And then Peter says, far from me. And one of the points that Malcolm brought out was that this is the same temptation. You can still serve God without the cross. You can still serve God without sacrifice. You can still serve God without suffering. You don't have to do this, don't do this, that Peter is saying. Same thing that the devil told Jesus on the Mount of Temptation, isn't it? You know, let's forget about the cross. You just bow before me and I'll give you everything that you're after. You don't have to go to the cross. I can do it. And so that's why Jesus says, away from me, Satan, because it's the same temptation. He recognizes it as that. And so what Jesus was trying to help his disciples to understand, and he had to work on it for some time, as Malcolm put it, is that we need to reset our minds so that we understand that there is no service without the cross. There's no advancement of the kingdom without suffering. That our position and our procedure with regards to the kingdom of Christ opposes the way that the world does things. So that, and this was kind of good, he referred to that passage in Isaiah where the Lord talks about bearing his arm. I'm going to bear my arm and bring salvation to Israel. And the Jews are thinking, great, the Lord's going to come down here and he's going to wipe out these Romans, when what was happening was Jesus was the Lord bearing his arm to go to the cross and to love us and redeem us. So that his work, his labor, his saving power is displayed in apparent weakness and in a willingness to suffer what the world throws at him in order to accomplish the very thing that the world and the devil don't want him to accomplish. So at any rate, that was that. And of course, Peter did stay on the path. So good for him. He ends up well. Now, as a conclusion to his sermon, Malcolm read for us a sonnet he's written on Mark 8:33, Get Behind Me, Satan. And it was printed in the bulletin, the church bulletin. I've got it right here. You know how people will come. Yeah, I don't know about you all, but when, especially since I've been a pastor, it's kind of amusing when people will visit other churches, and then they're sure that they bring the bulletin from where they were in. Look, Pastor, I went to church last Sunday. I was being good. You know how that is. But anyway, this is the bulletin from last Sunday, and so you can see it. Of course, in these videos, it's backwards. I don't know why they can't do something about that. The way computers record backwards. To me, it's just kind of crazy. But there's the poem and my notes that I wrote there as well. There's the poem, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to type this poem up for you and include it on the Patreon page. But let me go ahead and read it for you right now because it's really good. Get thee behind me, Satan. What is this? How could you say that to an anxious friend, who only wanted all that makes for peace, who loved you and would keep you safe and sound? But you see past, you choose another path, for you divine what we don't understand, and your rebuke, which feels so much like wrath, comes from a heart that loves us to the end. Speak to me too. Where have I set my mind? How much of it is in some comfort zone, content to leave all suffering behind, content that you should face it all alone? And then the last two lines, the couplet at the end of the sonnet. Throw Satan out behind me, turn me around, teach me to lose with you till I am found. And then Michael's session during the Sunday school hour, as I said, it's the Holy Spirit and the writings of C.S. Lewis, and it was an interesting taught because he says, the Holy Spirit's hardly ever mentioned in Lewis's writings. He mentions several books where, let's see, I think I've got them listed here in my notes. Let me look here real quick. Where he said, There is no Holy Spirit in, let's see, oh shoot, I didn't write them down. He mentioned several books where it's not mentioned. He did have one short quote from Mere Christianity, but then he referred to this book by Leanne Payne. Again, I'm sorry, it's backwards. That's Leanne Payne, Real Presence. It's a Baker book. Comes highly recommended by people like George Sayer, Lyle Dorset, Marjorie Mead, and so forth. And Michael recommended it. And she talks in here a good bit about how the Holy Spirit is definitely present and involved in the writings of C.S. Lewis. But what Michael was trying to get across was the fact that the Spirit of God, theologically and practically, the Spirit of God is present and doing His work as an unseen person. You all are familiar with the idea that the Holy Spirit has come not to point people to Himself, but to point people to Christ. And so that's a lot of what that was about, that the Holy Spirit is implicitly present. He spent a good bit of time on that essay, Meditation in a Toolshed by C.S. Lewis, and talked about the different kinds of consciousness, that there is the consciousness of something that we get by looking at it, but then there's also the consciousness of being inside of it and experiencing what it is. He noted the difference between the French word for not to know, savoir, and then another word, connaître. We get the word connotation from it, which is more of an experiential kind of knowledge. And so that you can know about the Holy Spirit, but you really are not under the influence of the Spirit or experiencing the Spirit or knowing the Spirit experientially unless you are inside the Spirit and being illumined by the Spirit. Just as you can look at the ray of sunshine coming in above the door of the tool shed, or you can look along that ray and see what it's illumining, and you're participating in the life of the ray, as you would think of it. He also mentioned the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, which was something new to me, but I looked it up today, and you probably know what it is, but it's this physics idea that since the matter of the universe is also waves of energy, I think it is, or waves of light of some kind. So when you talk about particles of matter, yes, they're a particle, but they're also a wave, and you can't therefore really pin down exactly where something is, where a particle is located. You can only approximate it, and you can only approximate it by trying to include as many occurrences of the waves of its existence into a particular moment in time, and you can say, yeah, it's in there, that sort of thing. So that you know there's something that is existing, you know that it is there, but to be able to definitively say, aha, there it is right there, just like this pen. I said, here it is, I got it. And he was saying the Holy Spirit is like that. You can't, or for example, Christ himself. Now this was a good illustration from Colossians. It's a little bit, well, you have to take it just as it is. And we know that Jesus of Nazareth can be physically located. Okay, that is possible in space and in time. But when it comes to the divine side of his nature, he referred to how Paul talks in Colossians about how Jesus holds all the universe together, which would include our own physical bodies and our brain's ability to think, and all the gifts of us, material, immaterial, everything else that is about us. And then he says, all right, that means that if you're thinking about Christ, even the thoughts that you're having about him, he is holding them together. He's making them work. So at what angle can you actually look at the present divine Christ in the world around us when he is in you and behind you and around you and through you? It kind of reminds you of the famous. Of course, I'm forgetting it now. The famous Irish prayer. It's is it St. Patrick's shield? Somebody's shield. Of Christ in me, Christ around me, Christ above me, Christ below me, all the rest of it, and you start realizing, wait a minute, where is Christ? Well, he's here. You get the idea? Same thing with the Holy Spirit. And then, of course, it's Michael Ward, so he's going to start talking about Narnia and the planets and these sorts of things. And but he got into Narnia and talked about how Aslan's spirit is in all the books. Everywhere you go in Narnia, it doesn't matter. He himself may not be there present, but he is there. He's affecting things. He's influencing things, just like the planets influence everything in the stories. This was interesting to me too, and this is kind of breaking up the subject material here. But the albatross. Maybe you're aware of this, but the albatross in the Voyage of the Dawn Treader that comes to the Dawn Treader when they're in the dark of the island of darkness or whatever it was called, and they can't see out and they're lost, and then that albatross comes and shows them the way out. He said that Lewis is borrowing that from Coleridge's poem Rime of the Ancient Mariner, which I guess I read in high school years ago. I don't remember it right now. It looks really good though. I got to go back and have a look at it. Where an albatross shows up, helps this lost ship to know where to go, and they follow the albatross. Sadly, one of the sailors kills it, and then everything falls apart from that point on. But there's a lot of Christian symbolism in that poem. For example, the other sailors put that dead albatross around this guy's neck, but when he learns to pray, and it said instead of a cross around his neck, he wore an albatross. Connection between the cross and the albatross. But as soon as he starts to pray, the albatross falls off his neck. You see, the guilt is gone, that sort of thing. So there's a lot of Christian, what's the word? There's Christian themes in the Coleridge's poem, and apparently Lewis was aware of that and borrowing that and that sort of thing. It's really a lovely observation about the Voyage of the Dawn Treader. But to finish up here, because, oh boy, the time is really going by. It's been 17 minutes. I got to quit. Michael just says, you know the Spirit by giving yourself to Him, not just learning about Him. And you probably gathered that already. So the Spirit is absent from Lewis's writings, while at the same time He's everywhere. And you can't really pin Him down. And you can't help but think about the fact, for crying out loud, I mean, Lewis was inspired by his writing, by the Holy Spirit as he wrote. There's no doubt about that, not, of course, in an authoritative way, but just because of the brilliance of his writings. Okay, well, I'm going to leave it at that for right now. I'll post this poem of Malcolm for you, and I might not get to the other material until next week, but I will do that. I am in earnest working on a book about Lewis's life in World War II, and also I've got a job interview on Monday at a bookstore here in town. We'll see what happens. But in the meantime, if you happen to know anybody you could encourage to become a patron, that would be good. I'm looking forward to our meeting over at our house in Highland Park Monday night, the 24th, 7 o'clock, for about an hour or so, reading the first 3 essays of the second part of God in the Dock, and doing it for you guys. And if you want to bring somebody along, that's okay. But it's something I'm doing primarily for y'all. And so do let us keep praying that the Lord will make the path clear regards to what we want to do about Lewis stuff here in Chattanooga in the future. And so I'm going to sign off. Y'all take care.